Hello, my fellow artists. Today we're going to kind of go back to basics. I'm going to show you some common brush strokes in watercolor. So this is pretty much for beginners, but it can also be for someone that maybe hasn't painted in a while and wants to, kind of revisit those skills. So this video is for you if you're in either of those groups, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so here we are. And we're going to start over here with the easiest, which most of us don't have a problem with when we start with watercolors. And that is painting wet on dry paper. Okay, so it's basically just like it sounds, dry paper. And we just load our brush with a little paint, and then we just, make a shape or a stroke on our paper. Okay, so like I said, that's pretty basic. This does not move anywhere, it doesn't blend, it doesn't spread out, doesn't blossom. This is when you really want like a good, strong stroke of color without a lot of texture or marks in it. Then that's when you want to paint on dry paper, okay? Because this will dry pretty much with no marks or anything in it, okay? It'll just be a nice solid color, okay? So then we move on to wet. Okay, so we're gonna do dry into, or wet into wet, excuse me. Just clean this brush. Okay, so I'm just putting a little water down here. Okay, and then I'm gonna grab my brush. We'll do the same thing we just did here. So I loaded up with some paint. Now see, in the wet, it blossoms and it spreads out, gives a lot of soft edges, which is really nice when you want a soft edge. Okay, and we'll put in the pink next to it, and that'll blend into the blue and blend into the water. So it's just a softer version of this. So you want to, if you need something soft, like you want hair maybe that's fading into the background, hair on a subject or something, then you may want to wet your paper first, and that way the hair would spread out and look more natural. Okay, not so hard edged. So here is also a wet into wet, but with paint as the base instead of just clear water. So we're just gonna make our little square of rose there. And while it is still wet, we're gonna go in, pick up our colors, and put in our turquoise, and then our little swipe of gold. Okay. So now see, again, these spread out and everything, but they're still maintaining their colors. They're just going to blend a little bit. Like you may get a little green where the gold where the gold crosses the blue. Okay, so it's just a way to get different colors within colors in a thing. Like if you're doing, I'm trying to think of an example, like let's say a pot, like a ceramic pot or something. And you want color within that, okay? Because you don't want it just to be a solid color. So let's say it's a pink vase, but there's things around it, so it's catching some golds and blues off the tablecloth. This is when you could use something like this. Okay, this next one is actually a hairdressing trick. And that's here. That's called dry brushing. Now, a lot of people buy all those fancy brushes that have all the little notches already cut out for them. They look like little teeth or something. Or they try to use fan brushes, which I don't particularly like either. All those little brushes that are so perfect, the trouble is they don't give you this uneven edge. And where you'd probably use this most is when you're doing wood grain, or you're doing bark on a tree, or you're doing striations in rocks. So that's all natural, that's all nature stuff. So you don't want it to be those perfect square teeth. So what I do is I take an old flat brush, okay, and I just have an inexpensive pair of hair cutting shears here. And I'm sure if you've ever had your bangs point cut, you'll know what I mean. But if you don't, here's what it is basically. You just take your brush, let me move over to the white spot, and you're just going to take your scissors and you're going to literally take them right in like this and just point cut right into your brush. Okay, and it's going to just take hairs out. Let me zoom in a little here. Till you end up with a nice ragged brush like that, okay? And if you can find the shorter bristle flat brushes like this, that's great. But if you can't, then cut it first, straight across, so it's short, and then go in and point cut to get all the notches. So this makes it much, much easier to do dry brushing and get those nice uneven lines. So I'm just going to go into some mud that's in my palette here. Okay, now if you hold it very lightly and let it lightly touch the paper, you're going to get lines that are more apart. You can press a little harder and you get more uneven where it's thicker and thinner in places. If you push down really hard, you're going to get texture within there, but it's going to be more solid. Okay, but that's how you get a variation when you're doing like wood or something like that. Okay, and I just buy these inexpensive blue Royal Langnickel brushes. They're really good for cutting, and they're very inexpensive. Each brush I think is like less than $1. So you're not going to be like, oh, I shouldn't cut this. $1, nobody cares. Okay, so this last one is Wet into Wet, but with blossoms. So I'm going to try to take some of my water off. I don't want too much water here. Otherwise, we'd have to wait a while. Okay, so there's just a nice square of gold. And if you look in my light, you can see how wet it is. See how shiny? So it's not ready for blossoms yet. So we're going to wait a minute here and just kind of let it dry a little bit. All right. Still a little bit. I'm just going to hit it with the heat gun for a sec. Literally a second or two, because that's all you need with the heat gun. Okay. All right. See, now you can see it's like duller. It's not. It's shiny in places, but it's dull in other places. See, it's not so like blinding white shiny. So that's what they mean by let some of the shine go off your paper. It doesn't mean you want it to be dry looking, but it can't be that bright, shiny stuff. So I'm gonna go into my turquoise, and you can do lines, you can do spatters, okay. And what I like to do is spatter color and then spatter clear water over the color. This is really good if you're doing rocks and things again in nature. Okay, let me zoom in on that so you can see it better. Okay, see that, all that texture you get in there, and you can let this will keep blossoming until that underneath paint is dry. So you can get all these beautiful blossoms, and you don't have to resort to using things like salt. I am not a big advocate of salt. I don't like putting artificial things into my watercolors. Water will give you these beautiful blossoms. You just have to wait until the shine starts to go off. That's the secret to that. So anyway, those are my tips for, like I said, beginners or people that are re-entering the watercolor world. And I hope you found it fun. And if you like this channel, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be having new content all the time, every week. And also hit the like button. I'd appreciate it. So everybody have a wonderful Christmas, and I'll see you next year.